So the topic we're talking about today, colorism, I think is something that comes up so often in so many different spaces. So what comes to mind for you when you think about colorism?
When I think of the term colorism, the first thing that I think of is light skin privilege. And growing up, I didn't really know that I had this light skin privilege. And as I got older, I started realizing this and I started reading more up on it. And so I definitely do realize that when we're talking about like the white gaze, because I have lighter skin, I've been given much more privileges and seen as like more passing.
Yeah, definitely. So when I think about colorism, I just think about like all the ways that it has come up, like growing up, and just always feeling like less beautiful or not beautiful at all because of my darker skin. And just like even looking at how like people would interact with each other in schools, like boys wouldn't really approach me, but wouldn't approach my light skinned friend. And it was just always weird because like I was like, I know I'm not like ugly, but like what's happening here? And I remember like thinking like especially in the summer like I don't want to get too dark because I always did, and that was something that I remember being really mindful of. And just also seeing like my aunts and some folks in my family, like the way that they wore their makeup to make their skin lighter is something that I would always remember. And even till today, like today, they would still do those things. So that's sort of what like comes to mind when I think about like colorism and like when those messages started to be reinforced for me.
When I consider colorism, I think about little things that happened when I was growing up. Like I had a cousin, and to this day, I don't know what her name is because all they called her was Blackie.
Ooh.
She was the darkest
Wow.
of all of us in the house, and that's all they ever called her. And to this day, I do not know her real name. It just makes me like wonder if it's happening in the house, is it ever like, how are we really going to change it? Because it all starts there at home. And then you go out into the real world and your voice like matters less to people because they're putting you in this box where they're like labeling you with all these traits like, okay, you're darker, this is just how you are. And this is your role in society, and they don't really give you a chance.
It's a serious, serious issue in all POCs, cultures, and lives that I feel like a lot of people tend to shy away from because people are so focused on the topic of racism. And as I see it, colorism is the cousin to racism. That's how it stemmed from, and it's something that's very serious. We need to talk about it. It's a very serious topic. The whole light versus dark thing, we really need to put it past us, especially as Black people, especially as Black women. It's like the whole thing of putting Black people against each other. It's nonsense. It's total nonsense. We really need to start building each other up instead of tearing each other down. It's like we take the power that we have for being light over dark and put each other down because of how white people put us down as being Black. We shouldn't be using it like that. We should be using it to, all congregate together and show that we're very diverse, we're of different shades, and that's beautiful.
I know that I've had very complex experiences with colorism, and I never really realized that it was colorism until rather recently, because I grew up in a PWI for my schooling, and so racism was always you said that took precedence over colorism. But looking back on things that I've experienced, I have friends who are darker skinned than I was, and their insecurities with getting darker over the summer when we'd go to the beach or whatever, stuff that I never really had. So I definitely think it's something that we need to talk about as a community and move through as a community so we can be more powerful in terms of fighting what we're fighting in the general world.
Definitely. I think that there's so much to unpack with that. And to Tamara's point about racism, I think that, racism, like many things, it's just so nuanced and so layered, right? So colorism is certainly a part of it. And then I think the other thing is colorism is cross-cultural. So this exists across cultures. It's not necessarily specific to Blackness. And we see the ways in which that it shows up, for Black folks across the diaspora, based on our interactions with it and our own racial identities. And I think, to Amari, your point, it reminded me of an experience I had when I was in grad school. There was a woman in my class, and we somehow got on the topic of racism. And she was talking about her two sons, who were at the time, I think they were both in high school. One was about my complexion, and another one was light skinned. And she was saying that her dark skinned son would come to her telling her that people would mistreat him based on like his darkness, including teachers and peers. And she told him that it was all in his head, that he was using it as an excuse to like not do his work and things like that. And I was like, whoa, that's incredibly like invalidating. And basically, and this is a Black woman, right? So she took the position that if he's not engaging in the classroom, it's because he's lazy. We were sitting across the classroom going back and forth, and eventually the professor had to call it a quits. And she's Asian, and she was just like, as a non-Black person of color, this is real. Right? Like, we're not going to pretend like racism doesn't impact us in these ways. But it was really interesting to me that she was just refusing to accept that this was a reality, right? As a dark-skinned person, part of that reality is feeling a different degree of racism, and that is valid.